Thank you. I've got just a couple of things to say before I start. First is, wow, this Mike Kelly's talk before me. If you missed that talk or you was not paying attention, congratulations, you played yourself. Secondly, I'd like to thank Mehdi and OBP guys for inviting me down. And they're really good sports. Like we're not competitors, but we tangentially are. And they always include me in the community. They're great, great role models and leaders of the community. So I'd like to thank them for inviting me. So moving on, my talk is called PSD2 is so last year. And what I mean by that is we're all talking about what these APIs might look like. Meanwhile, there's an API, a transactional API in production right now. So it's called Teller, and it's my company. And that's the web address if you want to look it up. The landing page is terrible, so just put your email in and then just forget you ever saw it. What it is the idea is it's a single uniform API for all banks. So as a developer, you integrate with any API, and when the customer gives their permission, you just get a collection of bank accounts, and they're from all that customer's institutions. So if they've got a NatWest and a Barclays account, they'll both be in the same collection. They can both perform transactions on them just by going through that one host. How I've done that is I reverse engineer. Some of you may already be familiar with me. For the ones that aren't, how I've done that is I don't have any special permission from the banks. What I've done is I've just downloaded your apps from the App Store and then cracked them and just worked out how your private APIs work. So if you were here last year, you would have seen me do it live on stage, much to the nervousness of some banks in the room. So who is from a bank here? All right, Alan Lockhart's not putting his hand up. Who's here from a bank? Cool. Well, this talk is really for you and for the entertainment of everyone else. So I'm going to talk about what's new since last year, what's next, why am I doing this considering regulator-led API initiatives, and of course what happens if banks turn hostile, because I have reasons to believe that they obviously will, and they have done actually in my experience. And then I'm going to finally give the banks what I like to call the Teller offer. Okay, so let's move into what's new. Since last year, when I cracked a bank's app on stage here, I've made that into and launched a private beta. We've got now about 100 users, 100 developer users just messing around and giving feedback. And there's 3,000 developers on the waiting list. That is despite the fact that our website looks terrible. And it's basically all down to latent demand for APIs and word of mouth. And it really is bad. Sorry about the website. We're working on it. So now we're working to improve coverage of the banks. What we have currently now is, you can see the major banking groups here with Barclays, Santander, Nationwide, RBS brands, which would include NatWest, Isle of Man, Ulster Bank, and the Lloyds HBOS brands, Lloyds, Halifax Bank of Scotland. I'll include TSB in that, even though they're now owned by Sabadell, but because they've had an agreement to use Lloyds systems for a few years, and the HSBC brands, which would include First Direct. So we've documented, by that I mean cracked the app for the majority of the groups. I haven't done HSBC yet because it's just absolute nightmare to open an account with them. They sent me, it's like the web form is terrible. It looks like it was made in 1995, and then I didn't even know if a white page came back. I didn't even know if it went through, and then 2 weeks later, they sent me some stuff in the post saying, can you scan your passport and some other government documentation and send it back in the post within 14 days, otherwise your application is going to be deleted. So I never got around to it, and the application was deleted. So if you want me to not crack your app, just have a really, really shit funnel for new customers. You might have bigger problems than that, though, than me cracking your app, if that is the case. But anyway, yeah, we recently launched our Barclays integration, which was a proud moment. The thing I really like about Barclays is we don't actually need to take a user's login credentials and any PIN, because we can do a proof of possession with the chip and PIN card and the CAP reader during enrollment. And then once we've done that, we don't ever need it again. So it's basically doesn't get users into a bad habit of putting their online banking credentials into a third-party service, which is really cool. We're going to do it with Nationwide as well. It's really cool. So our API can do accounts and balances, obviously, historical transactions, going back how far depends on how many transactions, how many years or how many units of time a bank exposes. Like RBS is very good; they expose 7 years. I think Barclays is a month or 3 months. But once we have them in our system, we'll keep them because obviously users might want them later on when they've been expunged from the bank system. Intra-account transfers, third-party payments. So for Mike Kelly's company, Ching, he'll be relying on that functionality. Also, payee creation for some of the banks. Most banks allow you to pay someone you've set up for a different channel. With the online banking or telephone banking or branch, if you set up a payee, RBS lets you pay an arbitrary account number and sort code as long as it's within a certain limit, and Barclays let you create a payee on through their mobile banking API. So you can pay people you haven't paid before depending on the bank, and you can obviously view, destroy direct debits and standing. I was meant to say standing orders, but it's been cut off from the overflow. So standing, yeah, you can view and cancel standings. Anyway, so this is what the API looks like on the command line with curl. And as you can see, it's really quicker than a bank's API. And got some accounts there, Barclays account, and my NatWest account at the bottom. So I'm going to now get transactions. Boom, very quick again. Bank has no chance of making anything this fast ever. You can see I've been in balance a couple of times, really like steak and eggs at 2 in the morning. Balance again, whoa, got a bad balance habit. Yeah, so you can just, that's basically my transactions. Yeah, so I'll just move on from there. And one of the other things we launched was something called TAuth. And basically that is our way of letting users authorize developers access to their bank account. So for the non-technical in here, you may have heard people talking about OAuth, and a concrete use case of that, say if you're on Instagram and you want to share your photo to Facebook, you need to authorize it and do the little dance so Facebook can grant access to Instagram to post stuff to your feed. It's the same sort of thing, but it's okay, the security for OAuth, but it's just completely not fit for purpose for banking APIs. There's a lot of problems. I went into it into great detail on the Teller blog, which is blog.teller.io if you're that way inclined. But this is what the user journey looks like. So I've made an SMS bot, and I'm just going to type hello in it, or type anything to get it to respond to me. And then the bot will send back a message with a link to click, and that will just redirect to the app, to the Teller application authorization endpoint. I'll put an R to authenticate as a user now, so I'm putting my mobile phone number in. It's in fact my real mobile phone number. Please don't prank call me tonight. And then we'll get a second factor via SMS now from Teller. So that's the security code. And then you put your Teller password in. And you'll just get your standard OAuth style dialogue saying what the app is and what it wants to do, and you can authorize it. It's bounced back to the app, which is a bit slow now because it's running off. It was running on a slow connection, but it's redirecting to the app with the token. The app now has a token. It texts me that, oh hey, I can access this NatWest account that you have on here. Talk to you later. Bye. So yeah, as I say, TAuth is an OAuth replacement, and what we need a replacement because bearer tokens are insane. It doesn't matter, if you're technical in the audience, you're an architect or whatever, and you're thinking, oh, we use JOT tokens. There's still a bearer token. It's just an obviously self-encoded token. The problem with OAuth 2 is the bank server can't guarantee that the integrity of the connection hasn't been compromised. It just has to take it on faith that it hasn't. So if it has, or the token is otherwise compromised, then I can do anything. I become that account owner, and I can do anything on the account that the API lets me do. So obviously that is completely insane when it comes to banking. So it was developed obviously because of the perceived shortcomings of OAuth 2. It's really simple. It's just SSL client certificates. That way the client verifies the server, and the server verifies the client. It's called mutual verification. So you can know that both peers have verified each other in the SSL handshake, and the connection isn't being manned in the middle by a third party. And the tokens you get are bound to the certificate and private key of the developer. So I'm not inventing my own crypto. It's nothing new. I'm not inventing anything. I'm just combining well-used, well-tested primitives. It's widely supported by existing clients. So, as I say, the privacy of the connection is guaranteed. The peers mutually authenticate each other. It has this quality called non-repudiation that shakes out of that mutual verification, which means that you can sign a transaction such that at a later date, if there's a dispute about it, you can't take it back. It's signed. We know it was whoever signed it. We know did it. So, in the case of like a user, an account owner losing money, we'll look if we have a signature that corresponds to the developer certificate, and if we do, we know the developer signed their transaction. So either it's a user error or the developer's key's been compromised. So teller and the bank can shift liability outside, either to the developer or to the user at that point. So the flow for OAuth, it's also a much more streamlined flow as well. The flow for OAuth is third-party application will redirect to the auth server. The user will grant application permission. This is like the happy path. The user's happy to authorize. The auth server redirects back to the application. The app exchanges what's called a grant token for an access token with its application secret, and then it gets a token back and makes an API call, and then it will refresh a token when the access token expires. So for some reason, stuff's getting chopped off the bottom here. So as you can see, it's quite complicated. There's a lot of dancing around. It's very ceremonious to actually do something simple. When with TAuth, because the tokens are actually bound to the private key, that never leaves the developer's environment. Teller never sees it. No one ever sees it. They're actually not sensitive. They can go straight through over the internet, like in the address bar in the browser. It doesn't matter. And consequently, the flow can be far simpler. So the third-party application will redirect to that auth server as before. The user will grant permission, redirect back to the application, and the app can make calls. And the token never expires because it doesn't need to. There's no security concern around it. It will implicitly expire if the user at a later date revokes permission for that application. So essentially, TAuth tokens are bound to a developer private key. The problem with working with client certificates is they're quite fiddly to generate and work with historically. So how it would normally work is you'd use OpenSSL on the command line, you type in this incantation that you're not going to remember, OpenSSL gen RSA-out private key.pem and the bit length for the key, 40096. Then you would use that key to create a certificate signing request, which is another blah, 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 something to type out. Then you take the file that generates and you go to the browser and you upload it to the service. And then you'd finally download the issued certificate, and it's just unreasonable to expect a developer to pay that cost. I mean, they probably won't. They'll just use a different API. So, in an ideal world, you want to give the user, all stakeholders, the best possible guarantees for security, but you also want to give the developer the best experience. So, thinking about that, we reduced creating developer identity certificates down to basically one click. So, how it works is they go to the certificate page for the application, and they'll just click this button, submit sign request. That generates a private key in the browser and generates a sign request and sends it off straight away. And then before I finish the sentence, the key in the certificate has been downloaded, generated, signed, and downloaded. That's how fast it is. So now I've got this certificate from this application that doesn't exist called online banking. It's really fast. It's actually secure as well. It uses this new technology in browsers called web crypto. So it uses native cryptography in the computer, not JavaScript crypto, and just relies on those technologies. As I say, it's just extending the theme of TAuth, which is to use well-proven technologies and bring them together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. So once you have a TAuth token, if it is compromised, what we'll see is we'll try and make a request with a token, but without using our certificate. It just says authorization token is invalid. But if we try it again, then we add our certificate and private key, the request will work and we'll get a valid response. So that's TAuth. Just intended to be a great improvement on security and developer experience. because OAuth 2 isn't very secure, and it also isn't very humane in terms of its developer experience. It's open, and I would love for other vendors, Open Bank Project, to be talking to Simon about it, and banks to implement it as well. So I'll be more than happy to help you with it. That's my email address. If you want help with that, just shoot me a line. So that's basically where we're at now. What's next? So we're going to integrate with the remaining UK banks, with or without their permission. And we'll take this slide. Oh, by the way, this little chap in a construction hat means that's in progress at the moment. We'll take that to this, okay? That's what's next. We also need to make countermeasures for the bank's countermeasures. So as you can imagine, banks aren't particularly happy about what I'm doing. So sometimes they do they do hostile things, like they will block our users, not only from using Teller, but they'll block them from using the mobile banking app. And then they'll add a fraud flag to their account and then make them go through an hour on the phone to get it removed. So obviously we don't want that to happen to users. So we're re-architecting our backend such that each user will have its own IP address. So basically how Teller works, there's a backend service that talks to the banks, right? So we'll call your registration with a particular bank an enrollment, right? So each enrollment will now have its own IP address, and we're also redesigning the system such that it actually the request pattern, traffic pattern, is more like a human user. Also, we'll cycle the IP addresses multiple times a day, so you have no chance. Sorry, this is how it is. Also, we're doing end-to-end system tests. The problem with doing a banking API is that I don't want to put everything. You need to split stuff up because different parts of the application have different levels of sensitivity in terms of security. So when you're doing like essentially a distributed system, you have a problem where your unit tests or your integration tests might work, but in the great scheme of things, when the systems join together, you find bugs. So we're doing end-to-end system tests, and that will be from a request being traced through from the outside all the way through Teller to a fake version of the bank, of each bank. I've written a fake version of each bank, and so we get a whole end-to-end trace. So we can use that for end-to-end system tests, and we can also use that for automatic breakage detection. So when a bank releases a new version of the app, what we'll do is we'll just patch the app to talk to our fake version of their gateway, and then we'll go through all the steps like registering for mobile banking, performing the transactions. As soon as something's broken, we'll know exactly where it's broken. We can just zero in and just fix it straight away and deploy it. So it is hard to build robust systems in the dark, and that's what I'm doing. You can't know about all the edge cases, but it's not impossible. So this is just the arbitrary complicated flow diagram that I found on Google. But basically, the gist of it is there are states you'll never hit in your own testing until you have some users using it. So ultimately, what we want to do is make it very robust so we can open it up to the other 3,000 developers on the list to an open beta before the end of the year. So that takes me on to the next point. Why do this considering regulator-led API initiatives? Well, circling back to Mike Kelly's talk, what you actually don't know is there's a little bit of information asymmetry there. You're all going to probably fail at delivering your APIs, so I'm your hedge. But mainly, it's a question of conflicting incentives. The nature of a bank's relationship with their customer is just completely diametrically opposed incentives. Your business model is, oh God, it's Tuesday. How can we charge Joe Bloggs for something today? And Joe Bloggs is like, oh shit, how can I not get charged? So it's just an example of the diametrically opposed incentives of a retail banking relationship. So that is why you don't care about your users, frankly. You just care about opening a door and then getting knocked over by all the money that flows in. So, I mean, look today, right? The regulators all over this. Like, the industry is all over this, trying to smother it with a blanket before it even gets started. Jack Gallagher's talk this morning. Let's just look at the slide, right? Key recommendations. Open banking standards to be overseen by an independent authority. Okay, cool, yeah. We're independent, but who's involved in the selection? Like, the incumbents are extremely overrepresented in every stage of this process, right? I'm not there. I was not allowed from participating. Ask Jack Gavigan why that is. I don't know. Even though the security working group, basically their entire calls were just Stevie Graham this, Stevie Graham that, Stevie Graham this, Stevie Graham that. Wasn't allowed to participate. I don't know why. You have to ask Jack about that. Third parties to be vetted and whitelisted, subject to security standards and insurance requirements. I had to look at that twice because the first time I read it, it said subject to arbitrary, opaque requirements that we're not going to tell you about, and we're just going to move the goalposts all the time. And the third one, banks retain the ability to shut down access if evidence of fraud is detected. Where's the burden of proof? Who's the burden of proof on? So if I've made a banking app that is threatening your business model, whoa, sorry, Stevie, we're gonna yank your developer keys because we detected a bit of fraud there. You can see like how opaque this process is, and it's just, I don't really think it portends to a good outcome. So banks depend on control of the channel for their business model, right? And APIs destroy that. So therefore, as I've subtly alluded to so far, expect banks to be subversive, to derail implementations, and to do things like appalling UX such that even if I make a great banking app, you got to go through like you got to pick through some like sewer system to like log into your bank account, right? And if you just look at the examples we have, right, the prior art's 3D secure. Like when you see this, when you're on a shopping cart, what do? You just close the tab and go to Amazon. It's really just a case of banks versus their own customers, and that's why I'm doing it. I care about user needs. As Mike said, it's about an API is a product, and you're building it for a user, right? So it's something that goes over the head of banks. It's a common theme in any highly regulated industry where it ends up being a de facto oligopoly, and they don't really need to compete with each other. There's this like emergent phenomena where they all just agree to like be shit, and then they just rely on the high wall to get into the game and just coin it in perpetuity. And assuming I'm wrong, yeah, no developer wants to integrate with 762 APIs. Sorry, they don't. They just want one. Okay. So anyway, that takes me on to my next point. What happens when banks turn hostile? All right. I don't know. Have we got sound on coming out of this guy here? Yeah. Right. I'm going to defer to the cultural icon of DJ Khaled for this one because he's like he's a very positive guy. You know, he's just infectious positivity, but you know not to mess with him. So there might be something in that there.
I'm more ready at all times. I have so many records that in my drive, trust me, anybody act up, I'll let one go.
So basically, in case you didn't hear that, he said, I'm fully loaded. I'm war ready at all times. I have so many records in my drive, trust me. Anybody acts up, I'll let one go. So really, what that means is, I'm fully loaded. I'm war ready at all times. I have so many private APIs fully documented, clients to them in multiple languages, mock gateway implementations, automated anti reverse engineering tools, and security vulnerabilities in all of your APIs. Trust me, anybody act up, I'll let one go. If you don't believe me, here's my fake Barclays gateway on GitHub. Here's the Barclays B&B reverse engineered specification. Not picking on Barclays. Barclays just have the hardest app and API to crack, and I cracked it, so I'm just showing off. So basically, what I'm trying to say is, I really want to provide an API for I'm talking to all banks here. I really want to provide an API to your customers, right? But if you attack me such that I no longer see value in doing that, I still believe that there's a strong public interest in customers having API access. So what will happen is we'll just go into the public commons. We'll just click on this in GitHub and make it public, and then not just I know about your API and how it works and all the things that are wrong with it, the whole world does. So anyway, that brings me swiftly on to what I like to call the teller offer. Before I was naive, I was new to the game. I used to go to banks and ask for what I call pocket money. I'd ask for POCs, proof of concepts. They're paid, right? I call it pocket money. And they'd be like, why? We're going to do this ourselves. Who are you? Who comes to a meeting at the 30th floor of a bank skyscraper in a back-to-front baseball cap and a North Face jacket? Go away. Go home. Now it's explain to them the situation, the nuclear option, and then say to them, yo, why don't we align our incentives? Why don't I pay you instead of me asking you for money? How many people here are doing API initiatives at banks that have spoken to vendors who've come to them trying to sell them something for like lots of money? Yeah? It's more than free, you're lying, all right? It's all of you. Yeah. Look at the guys at the back, they're just salivating, waiting for this thing to finish so they can pitch you. I'm flipping on its head. I'm trying to give you money, right? So I'm trying to create a business case for you. I'm trying to assume the delivery project responsibility, right? We're already seeing we've got the API in production, right? I've de-risked it quite enough for you already, right? And teller will exist regardless. So really, the teller offer is allow teller to operate without interference. Or you can enter into a commercial agreement where teller will pay you per user and you have a new revenue stream and no cost. And the third option, I've been advised by my lawyer that this is acceptable to say, come at me, bro. Thanks.
Thanks. So we're seeing that the ecosystem's going to be happening. So so there's the open API platforms and the partners that are happening, but then there's also fintech who are interested in working in this in the banking and fintech industry, who will create APIs and come to you in any case. Thanks again for your talk. Do we have a couple of? Yep. Great.
I just wanted to ask about OAuth, given that basically everyone's going, yeah, we're going to use OAuth, and you've just said there's a massive hole in it. Would you advise all banks to use something other than OAuth, for example, TAuth?
Yeah. Well, that's the short answer, but the longer answer is OAuth is completely fine for social media, right? But we're talking about people's bank accounts here where the level of seriousness for an account compromise is significantly higher, orders and orders of magnitude. It's basically difference is infinity, if you ask me. So it was fit for its original purpose, which was for delegated authorization for like Facebook and Google and stuff like that. But I don't think it's fit for. Well, there are ways to use OAuth, but you just degrade the developer experience. You can do things like request signatures, where you take the entire payload and you sign it with a key that the developer knows about, right? So that adds an extra layer of complexity on, and it's at layer 7, the actual request level of the stack. And so the developer needs to know about it, the libraries need to know about it, whereas with TAuth, that's the thing happens 2 layers down at layer 5, before we even get to HTTP. When the connection is being stood up, that's when the signature's happening. So the tools like curl and HTTP, they already know how to do that. So all those things are happening, but they're just happening at lower levels of abstraction that are away from the developer. So it gets out of the developer's way so they can just get on with building their apps. Quite a common refrain is from banks, is like, well, everyone's using OAuth too. Who are you? Well, I'm the guy that just popped your app and added you to my service. So appeals to authority don't really make any sense when you're talking about me, because I've actually cracked your app. So obviously, I'm not just some guy. But yeah, I think maybe not necessarily TAuth. OAuth 2 with extra hacks on top, or OAuth 1A was actually good. The difference between OAuth 1 and OAuth 2 they're like basically completely different things. They shouldn't even be called the same thing, right? OAuth 1 is actually fine because it does use signatures, but you have that complexity of having to create the signature on the request level, whereas with TAuth, it's done before we even get to HTTP. It's done at the TCP layer. So yeah.
Got another question.
So I preface this with I totally respect what you're doing. I'm totally on the let's pardon a night Snowden area, but I just have twofold question. One, is this legal or even regulated at all, or is it in the gray area still? And two, if I can ask, is this your full-time job? How is this funded? I'm curious the funding background of it.
So to answer your first question, yes, it is legal. There's something called the European Union Computer Programs Directive 2009 that enables reverse engineering for creating interoperable systems. I looked into it. A second question is, yes, this is my full-time job, but I've got a very specific set of skills that are highly valuable to certain clients. So I just can do a quick month of work, and then it gives me like enough income to last for about 18 months. So whenever I need to re-up, I'll just go to one of those guys. And
Follow-up question, are you anonymous?
what do you mean?
Are you
Am I the thing anonymous? Unfortunately not. No, I'm not.
Okay, any last questions? No? Okay, thanks again.
Cool.